the regular meeting to consider the bylaw, and it's to give second and third readings and to adopt the OCP amending bylaw for the small scale multi-unit housing and transit oriented areas. And we have that moved by Councillor Wooldridge and seconded by Councillor Hodge, that bylaw number 12,649 be read a second and third time and adopted.
Council discussion.
I guess first of all, thank all the public who have come out. I mean, we haven't had public hearings for a little while that have had as much communication from everyone. And one thing that's very obvious is you're very dedicated and passionate about your community. And so we can't help but be affected by that. And so I thank you for your time. But you're asking us tonight, some of you, to put a stake in the ground. I think I heard the word step up, have some guts, show some courage, fight back. I'm not the guy to do that. Like, we have a duly elected provincial government that's come down, given us this direction. It's not some rogue government, it's our provincial government. They've asked us to take their direction, and I, as a councillor who exists as a city, because they give us the ability to do so under the Local Government Act, I'm going to comply. I think it's the right thing to do. Doesn't mean we don't try and steer the ship, but I don't think fighting them back and going to war is the answer. So I think there will be some changes, and I think we're going to see some bigger buildings. But my daughter just bought a lovely apartment in Granville. It's in a beautiful old heritage area. Trees are great. People love it. It's not far from Strathcona. But it's 8 stories high. She loves being there. She loves being in the neighborhood. It can work. So I think I'm asking the public to give staff the opportunity and our council ways to move this forward, but at the same time look at ways to protect the things that we really love about this neighborhood.
So first of all, I hope none of you in the audience think that any of us around this table are happy that we have to take our direction from the province so intensely. We are really not a third form of government. We are under the auspice of the province, and sometimes that really hurts us. And people don't even realize that this is our role. And like Councillor Hodge, I'm not happy either. And like I said, I don't think any of us are happy, because this is our city. This is your city. This is all of our city. Most of us have been here for a very long time. And it does bother me. Who knows the city better than you and I? All of us. We do. Maybe if you would like to contact your MLAs, they are the province, perhaps you can get some help for us. I mean, they are the province. I've spoken to them. I'm sure all of us around, I know the mayor speaks to them and to other mayors. I know that our city manager speaks to them. So maybe you should speak to them and say your displeasure.
And I appreciate the residents. I think they're being very reasonable in the sense they're not against 4 homes per lot. There's a lot of discussion about what we can do with a good design, and I think that's important. As far as density transfer, I don't believe it's staff's job to lobby and advocate. That's the role of mayor and council. And a comment that I came across Vancouver Sun recently, they reported that Oak Bay, Saanich, Delta, and other communities around the province will not be meeting their housing targets, and it's looking like several other communities won't be meeting the June 30th deadline. There'll be no consequences considering there's an election pending. This is uncharted waters. Langley Township Mayor said he's going to find a way to have public hearings. So there's other communities that are pushing back against the province, and I think we have an opportunity to do what's best for our community. And I thank you, Your Worship, for working with the Mayor's Urban Caucus, and I think it would be good to wait to hear from them. And the horses left the barn. I think maybe we get some oats and get the horses back into the barn. and we can consult with the various stakeholders such as Kasan, Paracas, and other community citizens, get the right design guidelines in place, and then move forward. Like Councillor Hodge, I'd like to prefer to wait till we have the guidelines and see what's best for our city, and and protect our heritage conservation area, because I don't believe this provincial government's one size fits all planning. It's going to work for Kelowna, and as I alluded to, other communities feel the same way. It's not going to address the affordability crisis. So the question is our council willing to take on this top-heavy controlled by the province? I'm willing to put a stake in the ground and not be bullied by this top-heavy sledgehammer controlling provincial government. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you.
And part of the challenge that we have in these roles, and as in my second term, is we have to both appreciate folks' current neighborhoods and then also be looking forward into who we're going to accommodate into the future. And often when we hear from young people, what I hear consistently is not just housing affordability, but availability. And it's not even just 20-year-olds like who spoke tonight, but I was speaking to a university professor at a luncheon a couple of weeks ago that was being consistently outbid for multi-unit unit buildings throughout the city. As it's been spoken to, we're children of the province. We don't act autonomously from them. We are given the permission to operate under the Local Government Act. So throwing a sledgehammer down and pounding the desk might look good in the headlines, but at the end of the day, it's working together of accomplishing both levels of government goals. So I understand it's uncomfortable, and that's the hard part about this job, is that we have to always be looking forward to the future of how we're going to accommodate more and more people that are living here. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. So I'll be supporting the motion today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ben Harris, 667 Pimlico Road. Today we've heard a lot of opinions from a lot of people who are homeowners in this economy, and that makes up about 2/3 of the Canadian economy, homeowners. Now, there's one portion of the economy that didn't get to buy a house 10 years ago when it was affordable, and that's young people like me. I'm 20 years old right now. I've got 2 years left in college, and looking to move out in those 2 years. And I'm looking out in a housing market that I'm scratching my head. How am I going to be able to buy a house like my parents did back 20 years ago? How am I going to be able to afford places to live? And that's affordability is the biggest issue of my generation. From everybody I talk to, and even everybody who is older than me that still doesn't own a home, they talk about affordability, and housing is the number one component of affordability in this economy. Although the council does recognize that there is a need to build affordable housing in Kelowna, it is one of the council priorities. There is one councillor in particular that, despite saying they want affordable housing, has made many quotes otherwise. I was at the Kelowna Council meeting yesterday, and I've got a quote from Ron Canning here saying, "We're not going to build our way out of this affordability crisis." And that just purely spits in the face of the fact that this affordability crisis is caused by a lack of housing supply. And it's been a lack of housing supply throughout the last 20 years, throughout before that. And
I wanted to clarify when I said we're not going to build our way out of this affordability crisis, because it's reference to an article that talked about the economic theory is not producing the promised affordability. It was Minister Ravi Kahlon, who's our housing minister. He had a modeling analysis that upzoned single-family middle-class neighborhoods, shows it would produce less than half the supply needed to meet the demand. The CMHC estimates to BC to get housing affordability back where we experienced in the early 2000s, we'd need to build 610,000 units more than could constructed. So it's really an affordability aspect that's combination. There's bigger issues from federal immigration and the ability to actually produce the number of units. And our land costs, something the city doesn't have control over as far as market rates. So I just wanted to clarify that. So I appreciate you, Ben, for being here this evening as well.
unfortunately, and it's from hearings like this, from people, from specifically NIMBYs, people who don't want to see development that brings in much needed housing supply into their backyard. There's been constant talks about, oh yeah, can we shift this density? Can we move it somewhere else? And despite the fact that, the province has said, and as have been confirmed in the last council meeting, that they will not do that, even if they could, we shouldn't aim to move density. We shouldn't instead move density into areas that don't have that don't have as much of a means to fight for themselves to fight against density. Density is something that's shared throughout the entire city, and that includes the Abbott Street corridor. I actually biked here today on the Abbott Street corridor. I love it. I love our historical area in there. I love the beautiful rows of houses in there, the historical feel to neighborhood, historical look. But one thing that doesn't define that historical area, that doesn't set it apart, is the fact that there's no there's no housing affordability there. Housing affordability doesn't have to detract from the character of the neighborhood. This new 6 stories that's going to be built on the edge of this neighborhood can be perfectly integrated into the historical character of the neighborhood. And like many of the people before me have said, they've done it successfully in many areas, like Amsterdam and plenty of areas in Europe that were bulldozed by World War II. And so if they can do it in the other side of the world in Europe, why can't we do it here? Simply put, density is not what defines character of the neighborhood. Character is defined by the appearance and look of the building. So if there is concerns about about the forming character of the neighborhood, don't restrict that to meaning that we need less people in that neighborhood, we need less density. No, what we need is we need good direction to give the developers on how to properly design their buildings to fit in with this area, and that really gives me hope. That this legislation actually gives me hope. It gives me hope that when I graduate in a couple of years, maybe not then, but maybe in years following that I'm going to be able to afford a house. I'm going to be able to. I might be able to afford a home to live in a neighborhood that I've loved and I've biked through many times. It gives me hope that I'm going to be able to afford to live in the beautiful city that we call Kelowna. And honestly, I think that we should actually take this transit-oriented development and even further it more. We've got a beautiful BRT network on the highway, which provides great transit access to 60% of all jobs, or 60% of all jobs in Kelowna on the highway. Why aren't we extending this 400-meter 12-story zone to every rapid bus stop in Kelowna, where that transit access still is there? Council and your worship, I ask you today, don't just think about the people who have been lucky enough to afford a house in our economy, but think about the young people like myself who can't right now, and think about us. Think about everyone.
So I took a little bit of time to clip together segments from the May 14th public hearing. And the reason I did that, young Ben Harris triggered me to do that when I listened to him talk, because I, like so many people in our city, we are in tune with your very valid concerns, young man. So I'm gonna quote a real estate colleague who I'm not gonna mention by name because that's his place. But 3 years ago, we had talks about housing affordability, and this realtor said, young people are losing hope. And I heard Ben say that, and that's what triggered this. And this colleague's thoughts were, we have to stop thinking less about real estate as a commodity and more about a basic human need and a right. Now, let's put the homeless issues aside. That's a whole different issue. When we talk about rights for people that work and earn it and work towards affordability there, that's what I'm talking about. People like Ben Harris, okay? Whether or not your college or university degree is not the relevant part, but the hard work and those are the people that I'm talking about. Okay, affordability and supply is critical. Now, but where I do want to talk about is the NDP and the overreach and the trampling of rights under the guise of affordability and accessibility. And that's just where I'm concerned. In politics, the far left and the far right is always an issue. And it's the same thing here now as we talk about real estate and how to get to affordability and balance. It's the extremes on either side that are, to me, causing the issue. Okay. Ben, you talked about NIMBYs, and that's a really ugly thought process. I'm with you. But there are some cases where, development doesn't always belong in one place. Not saying it does or does not in the Heritage District. You had some really good points about character doesn't have to be defined by size, I think was the word you said. I'm going, wow, this young guy's smarter than I was at that age, maybe smarter than I am now. But in saying that, as Ron Cannon said, perhaps this types of density can be in roughly the same area, but shifted more towards the Toko sites and everything. Do we protect an area like the Heritage District? At least a little bit more. And again, I don't know. I'm not talking about the Heritage District so much here. Okay, but I want to talk about affordability and accessibility, but the rights and how one extreme, and here I'm talking about the NDP, is harming people, in my opinion. Okay, and the last 3 years, here's what the NDP's done. They've taken away the rights for Stratus to have rental restrictions. Now there's two arguments on that one. I lived in a really good building. My wife and I lived at a building called Centuria until about 4 years ago. We were there for about 8 years. Now we had no rental restrictions there. They were larger suites, and our tenants, I think we were probably 30% tenants in there. And 98% of our tenants were some of the best people in the building. They were younger. They brought a vibrancy to the building. But two of our tenants did things that no owner would have done, that I'm not even going to get into. But if some people said, you know what, I don't want tenants in my building because of what went on here, that was maybe a valid concern. So I guess rental restrictions, they were in so few buildings in our city, they weren't affecting anything, but the government took away that right for Stratus to vote on something. People bought in a building because it had rental restrictions, and the government said, "No, can't do that anymore." That's just one extreme. Okay. I've been very vocal on the short-term rentals, and sorry, beating a dead horse here. Purpose-built short-term rentals. That's a passion of mine right now. People bought purpose-built suites in buildings that were zoned. That this NDP government, who is, under the guise of creating affordability, is causing huge financial loss to a lot of people, Ben, just like you, maybe 10 years older, but people that just like you that maybe didn't buy one piece of real estate to live in, but decided, you know what, this is what I can afford. I'm going to buy this as an investment vehicle. I own real estate. I'm going to rent. Somebody like you, if you were 5 years old and might have bought one of these things, you would be getting crushed right now. And your savings that you use to buy a piece of real estate could be gone. So that's a decision that this government has made that is so far to one side, it's harmful, and they're not listening. And now what we're talking about here is government stepping on the throats or the toes of municipalities to be able to make their own decisions. As Ron Cannon said, that one-stop-fits-all mentality. There are places density makes sense. There's other ones that maybe it doesn't. And the NDP government coming from 30,000 feet in the air saying this is what we're doing. I think that's the issue we have, that I have a concern about, because somebody like you, a few years old that could buy real estate and could be really harmed. So the concept, supply and demand, changing mindsets, I love what you're saying. So we've got elections coming up here. I am sure, so two things, let's talk federally. The extremes, what Trudeau's done is one thing. Pierre Poilievre, if you get elected, I'm hoping that the Conservative Party, if they get elected, has some balance and thinks about the middle a little bit. And then conversely, and then we have a provincial election coming up this fall. What the NDP government is doing to property rights here is scary. Yes, we need to work towards making it work for people like Ben Harris. The NDP is so far on to the left. It's scary, and people like you, Ben, should be concerned about it because it could come back and bite you, and then you know what, in 10 years if you own a home. And then whether it's the Conservatives or the Uniteds or a coalition of both, just remember, you know what? If any political party, whether you're left or right, if you're a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, most people aren't going to have all that big a reason to be pissed off at you. Just something to think about. Thanks for watching.